I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I'm sure it has been a happy one. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. It's getting cold. It's almost like winter up here. What to do? Lots of rain too. I thought we would have a little light relief this evening with the story of Angulimala. Now, I think most of you will know about Angulimala, but there's actually a whole discourse on him. He's the good thief in the Christian tradition. He's the really bad fellow who converts his life and becomes fully liberated. So the backstory, as they say these days, is that he was the son of a minister at the court of King Pasenadi. So remember, he's the king up in Kosala, which is North India, above the Ganges, way above. And he is studying at Taxila. So we mentioned this university town up in near Rawalpindi, North Pakistan today. And seemingly he was a great student, and all the other students very jealous of it. So they spread rumors about him, even to the point of committing adultery, or having sex with his wife, the professor. And for that, the professor asked him for an honorarium. So that's the word they use here. It's although the teaching was given free, there was presumed payment at the end of all the teachings, something of that nature. So he asked him, of course, for 1,000 fingers, little fingers from the right hand of human beings. So when Angulimala left, he felt obliged to make good this honorarium. So he began terrorizing this territory in the kingdom of Pasenadi. And he was known as a murderer. Anyway, we'll take the story up then. So the Buddha is, in fact, in Savatthi, that's the capital of Kosala. On that occasion, there was a bandit in the realm of King Pasenadi of Kosala named Angulimala, which means necklace of fingers, who was murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. Villages, towns, and districts were laid waste by him. He was constantly murdering people, and he wore their fingers as a garland. Now, the Blessed One had heard that his mother was going to go out. And again, the story is that he was just one finger short of the tally of 1,000. So the Blessed One, presumably to safeguard his mother, went out to meet him. So he takes his robe and bowl, etc., and out he goes. Now, on the way, the cowherds, shepherds, and ploughmen passing by saw the Blessed One walking along the road towards Angulimala and said to him, do not take that road, recluse. On this road is the bandit Angulimala, who is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows, violence, and merciless to living beings. And they told him this about 3 or 4 times, but of course, the Buddha walked on. Now, when Angulimala saw the Blessed One coming from a distance, he thought, oh, it's wonderful, this is marvelous. Men have come along this road in groups of 10, 20, 30, even 40, but still they have fallen into my hands. Now this recluse comes alone, unaccompanied, as if done by fate. Why shouldn't I take the recluse's life? That's his last, that would be his last finger. So he took up his sword and shield, buckled on his bow, and quiver and followed close behind the Blessed One. Now then the Blessed One performed such a feat of supernormal powers that the bandit Angulimala, though walking as fast as he could not catch up with the Blessed One, who was walking at a normal pace. So here we have a bit of magic, you might say. And Angulimala thought, this is amazing, this is wonderful. Formerly, I could catch up even a swift element and seize it. I could catch up even a swift horse, a swift chariot, a swift deer. And though I'm walking as fast as I cannot catch up with this recluse who's walking at his normal pace. So what can we make of that? Well, we have to take it as it comes. But the point is that at some point, the Angulimala says, "Stop, recluse, stop." Now, Angulimala is the son of a Brahmin who's at the court of Pasenadi. So there's in my mind, there's a possibility that Siddhartha Gautama, as he was before he became the Buddha, would have met him at some point. And there might have been some recognition. So as he's coming on the road, there is some recognition as to who this is. And maybe even Angulimala will have heard of the reputation that the Buddha has. And Angulimala is not evil in himself. He's trying to fulfill this honorarium. And he would have known that to kill a recluse, and especially someone who was possibly fully liberated, wasn't the best thing to do. Because like everybody else, or so we say most people of that age, he would have believed in rebirth. And that's not a happy destination for someone who kills a fully liberated being. Anyway, he does shout, "Stop, recluse, stop." And the Buddha turns and says, "Well, I have stopped, Angulimala. You stop too." Now, then the bandit Angulimala thought, these recluses, son of the Sakyans, speak truth, assert truth. But though this recluse still walking, he says, "I have stopped, Angulimala, you stop too, supposing I question the recluse." So this awakens in Angulimala a certain inquisitiveness. So then he breaks into verse, you see. "While you are walking, recluse, you tell me you've stopped, but now when I have stopped, you say that I've not stopped. I ask you then, O recluse, about the meaning. How is it that you have stopped and I have not?" "Angulimala, I've stopped forever. I abstain from violence towards living beings, but you have no restraint towards things that live. That is why I have stopped and you have not. At long last, this recluse, a venerated sage, has come to this great forest for my sake. Having heard your standards, teach me the Dharma, and I will indeed renounce evil forever." So that's a rather quick conversion. Anyway, he was taken by the Buddha's presence and his words. So anyway, by the end of this stanza, he actually wants to become a monk, and the Buddha says, "Come, bhikkhu," and that is how he became monk. Now, in those very early days, if somebody wanted to join the Buddha as a monastic, the ordination was simply him saying, "Ehi passiko," come and try. That was it. Later on, when there were arahats, he established this, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And that would have been, which is what lay people do. And in fact, we do it every morning. Everybody does that, even the monks. But it was an ordination at that time. Later on, because of the many naughty things that monks and nuns did, and the new rules, then there was a much lengthier ordination whereby all the rules were taken on. Certain people could not join who had joined. So, for instance, one of the consequences of Angulimala is that a rule was made that you couldn't ordain anybody who was a convicted a thief or murderer or whatever, at least until he had completed his sentence. So Then he wandered back in state. He went to Savatthi, and he lived at Savatthi with the Buddha. Now, on that occasion, great crowds of people had gathered at the gates of King Pasenadi's in a palace, very loud and noisy. So they'd heard about this, and they went to the king and said, "Look, this bandit Angulimala is in your realm. He's a murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows," and so on and so forth. Now, the king must put him down. Then, in the middle of the day, King Pasenadi of Kosala drove out of Savatthi with a cavalry of 500 men and set out for the park. He drove thus far as the road was passable for carriages, and then he dismounted and went to the Blessed One. The Blessed One, of course, the Buddha would have heard all these horses. So he said, "What is it, great king? Is King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha attacking you, or the Lichavis of Vesali, or other hostile kings?" "Oh, Venerable Sir," says what's his name? Pasenadi. "No, I'm not being attacked, but there's a bandit in my realm called Angulimala who is murderous, etc. And I shall never be able to put him down, Venerable Sir." "Great king," says the Buddha, "supposing you were to see that Angulimala had shaved off his hair and beard, put on the ochre robe, and gone forth from home life into homelessness, that he was abstaining from killing living beings, taking what is not freely given, false speech, refraining from eating in the evening, ate only one part of a day, was celibate, virtuous, and of good character. If you were to see him thus, how would you treat him?" "Oh, Venerable Sir, we would pay homage to him, or rise up for him and invite him to be seated. We would invite him to accept robes, alms food, and resting place, or medicinal requisites. Or we would arrange for him lawful guarding, defense, and protection. But Venerable Sir, he is an immoral man, one of evil character. How could he ever have such virtue and restraint?" Now, on that occasion, the venerable, so he's already a monk, you see, the venerable Angulimala was sitting not far from the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One extended his right arm and said to the king, "Great king, this is Angulimala." Now, the king was frightened, alarmed, and terrified. And knowing this, the Blessed One said to him, "Don't be afraid, great king. Do not be afraid. There's nothing for you to fear from him." Then the king's fear, alarm, and terror subsided. And then the king says to him, "Venerable Sir, is the noble lord really Angulimala?" "Yes, great king." "Venerable Sir, of what family is the noble lord? Of what family is his mother?" "My father is Gagga, great king. My mother is Mantani." "Then let the noble lord Gagga Mantani put to rest content. I shall provide robes, alms food, resting place, medicinal requisites." Now, at that time, Angulimala was a forest dweller, an alms eater, an alms food eater, a refuse rag wearer. Remember, they took the shrouds from the corpses on the Charnel grounds and sewed them into robes, and restricted himself to 3 robes. He replied, "Enough, great king, my triple robe is complete." So what this shows you, that even at that time, anybody who was dressed as a Brahmin or as a cleric or one of these people who'd gone to homelessness, a samana, a recluse, there was great respect for them. I'm sure there was a bit more discussion before the king offered to make him robes and whatnot, but you can see that there was just a general respect for people who'd left the home life for homelessness. Anyway, the king now leaves because he is busy. We are busy and have much to do. He's using the royal plural there. We are busy. "Now is the time, great king. Do as you think fit." Then King Pasenadi rose from seat and went off. Now, then it was morning, and Venerable Angulimala, dressed, taking his robe and outer bow, went to Savatthi for alms. As he was wandering for alms from house to house, he saw a certain woman, or he heard a certain woman, giving birth to a deformed child. That's what it says here, but the commentary says having difficulty giving birth, and was shouting and moaning and so on and so forth. And he thought to himself, how beings are afflicted. Indeed, how beings are afflicted. And then he came back to the Blessed One and he sat down to one side. Venerable Sir, he said to the Blessed One, I dressed and taking my robe and bowl, etc. And I saw a certain woman giving birth, having trouble giving birth. And when I saw this, I thought, how beings are afflicted, how beings are afflicted. In that case, Angulimala, says the Buddha, go to Savatthi and say to that woman, sister, since I was born, I do not recall I've ever intentionally deprived a living being of life by this truth and asseveration. May you be well, and may your infant be well. Venerable Sir, said Angulimala, wouldn't it be telling a deliberate lie? For I have intentionally deprived many beings of life. Then Angulimala, go to Savatthi and say to that woman, sister, since I was born with the noble birth, in other words, since he ordained, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this asseveration, this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. Yes, Venerable Sir, says Angulimala. And later on, he went in and stood at the gate there, or stood before the house, so that at least she could hear what he said. Sister, since I was born into the noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. And then the woman and the infant were well. So, even to this day, if you turn up at a monastery and tell the monks that you're pregnant, they can offer you this blessing if you wish it. It of course only applies to women, you see. So it's still used today as a blessing, as a blessing. Anyway, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute, the Venerable Angulimala, realizing for himself with direct experience here and now, entered upon and abided in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly leave from home into homelessness. Birth is destroyed, etc., etc. In other words, he becomes an arahat. Now then, when it was morning, and this was after he became fully liberated, taking his robe and bowl, he went into Savatthi for alms. Now on that occasion, someone threw a clod and hit the Venerable Angulimala's body. Someone threw a stick, someone threw a potsherd, with blood running down from the cut in his head, and his bowl broken, and his outer robe torn. So in other words, the crowd attacked him. He went to see the Blessed One, and the Blessed One said to him, bear it, Brahmin, bear it, Brahmin. You are experiencing here and now the result of deeds because of which you might have been tortured in hell for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years. So this was obviously a consequence of his murders. There must have been lots of people who were still very, very angry. And then he went off, he was alone, retreat, experiencing bliss. So then he obviously left and lived out the rest of his life. And there's a whole verse here which tells the story, retells the story. And there is one verse which we can take to heart, perhaps. They are fools and have no sense who give themselves to negligence. And those of wisdom guard diligence and treat it as their greatest good. So this is a story where, you know, it gives us a bit of hope, doesn't it? Somebody who commits terrible crimes, although we have to remember he hasn't got the heart of evil. He's repaying a debt, even though it's a horrible way to pay a debt. Is able to, in the Western sense, repent and to convert, to change his way completely, and be overcome by remorse, and through the practice of vipassana, etc., find complete liberation. So if he can do it, I'm sure we can. So that's just to repeat that verse for us. They are fools and have no sense who give themselves to negligence, and those good. So I hope that you found that little story inspiring, and that you take up the cudgels of our practice and that you will be liberated like Angulimala in no length of time, sooner rather than later. So we can do a bit of practice.